And we're recording. Awesome.
Oh, cool. It was good to see you, man. I was like halfway debating if I should even do questions or we just freestyle. That'd be fun too. But,
Oh, I hear you, man. I hear you. The questions can really help with having like an order to the transmission because sometimes if
no,
you
no, I
go
meant
in,
freestyle
yeah.
rap.
Oh, freestyle rap?
Yeah,
Oh, what do you mean? Were you hold on, I'm so confused. Can you repeat what
I
you
was
originally had
debating
said?
if I should just use the session to just like be like just go back and forth like in a cipher.
Oh, dude, that would be so fun.
But
If
I
you
do
want,
have some questions I don't know if I would be able to answer otherwise. I mean, I would, but the clarity always helps, so I'll probably utilize it that way instead.
okay, sure, sure. If you want, we can always stop like a few minutes early and and use some
Well,
time
no,
for some
I'll
back.
let you. Yeah, if we can, that would be dope.
That'd
But
be super fun, man. I would love that. I am gonna just turn the audio up because I can hear you, but if we talk at the same time accidentally, it's really challenging to hear. So I'm just gonna crank
okay.
my volume as much as I can. Okay. Can you just speak a little bit more for me?
Bop, 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 bop. I don't have nothing to say, but I can make
There,
bops.
there we go. No, I crank in the volume. That's perfect. So, um, let me get my phone alarm all queued up, and we'll go in. You want me to set it for a few minutes early, or you want to do it for the full hour?
Let's do it for the full hour, and then if I finish the questions, I'll. Are you conscious, or do you like clock out like Bashar does?
No, I'm like kind of there. I'm kind of
Oh,
there.
okay. Yeah,
I'm
I
like,
noticed that 'cause you'll comment on the question. You're like, oh, those are interesting questions. I was like, oh, okay, so this person's a little like he's not all the way splitting, I guess you could say.
yeah, there's still like a it's almost like when you're dreaming and you're kind of like observing your dream a little bit, and you're like, oh, okay, it's that kind of consciousness.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool.
Yeah, man. Well, we're all queued up with the alarm clock. Let me just double check that. But we can go ahead. Yep, we're good. We can go ahead and dive in. So I'm gonna get into the state. I'll see you at the end, Rem.
Okay, wonderful.
Greetings, good day to you, this day of your time. It is our species. I is joy, passion, and ecstasy to be able to speak to you through this channel. We extend you now the following question. How are you doing?
I'm absolutely wonderful.
Oh, how exciting! As are we. How would you like to explore together?
Okay. So the first question is, I started coming in contact with something. So I had like a dream, um, and there was a bush in the dream, and I was aware that there was an alien in the bush, and I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. So I approached it kind of like, and then I was like, oh, I could feel more of myself when I do that. And then I thought, okay, well, let me take my time and let me see what comes up so that I don't go into psychosis, and let me just like take it as it comes. And then then I had another dream later on where I met the alien, but they were in a human body, I guess to not scare me. And I was communicating with them telepathically, but they weren't. They didn't have too much to say. And then they told me about using the D flat major scale or minor scale with either or when composing music because it centers around C sharp. It was briefly. Was that a thing from your society, or was that something else? Maybe.
Not a being from our species, but it represents in many ways what we would call a conglomerate symbol. A
Okay.
conglomerate symbol meaning many different types of beings that you're connected to form a collective consciousness together and project that collective consciousness as the symbol. So many different societies are able to interact with you at once through that particular symbol.
Oh, okay. Well, that's dope. Thank you for clearing that up for me.
Yes.
Okay. So I realized that also when asking questions, giving context helps for like the more clarity, because then you understand the purpose. So for the past 5 years, I've been kind of deepening my understanding on sex and how beauty relates to that, and really combating a lot of misconceptions I had about spirituality and sex. And I feel called to pen a book at some point, but mostly after I embody those understandings, because I feel like it's something that not just me is confused on, and maybe the clarity that I'm finding would be helpful. So I've been going through the Bashar material, and the questions I asked you last time, and even times prior to that, we had 2 sessions before, we're all like getting clarity on certain subjects. So a lot of these questions, they don't always entail full answers, just sometimes confirmation that I'm on the right track, and that's enough, I think.
All right. Yes, we understand.
Okay. So Bashar has mentioned the idea of physical beauty is usually to do with symmetry in terms of how we perceive beauty, and maybe other planets too, I don't know. But in relation to this idea, what are people really saying about the physical idea of disgust when something disgusts them? Does it just verge from their agreed sweet spot of symmetry and asymmetry, or does it possibly trigger beliefs in disorder, or what is happening there mechanically?
It depends on the nature of what is being experienced as disgusting, because what you consider to be disgust isn't necessarily a cookie cutter sensation. There are different versions of that sensation that are relevant to different types of experiences. Some levels of disgust have to do with the idea of what you consider to be responses to physical disease and imbalance that can lead to what you consider to be physical death. So from a very neutral point of view, that is how we describe the sensation of disgust. However, many individuals, because of judgments that they place upon different things, may have a response to something that is close to the vibration of disgust, when that sensation isn't necessarily, let's just say, the most balanced or appropriate response to the thing that they are judging. Rather, disgust only exists as a side effect of the judgment.
Okay, so how would you tell or discern the difference?
Well, the idea is to really take an honest look at whatever it is an individual is observing when they feel they are having a response that relates to disgust. For example, if an individual is simply looking at a person whom, to again go off of the idea of physical beauty, does not necessarily reflect physical beauty, and the response the observer is having is disgust, that can be an indication that what they are experiencing is coming from a place of judgment, rather than the idea of a neutral observation of the person's physical symmetry.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
And briefly, can you explain or expand on how resonance relationship is operating in the experience where there's a strong attraction to another? I think more in physical terms. And, well, maybe, actually, I don't know. Scratch that. In relation to, okay, yeah, that's the whole question. Sorry, do I need to repeat it?
That's all right. We will share an
Okay.
answer and let us know if it suffices, and we will elaborate more if needed. When individuals are finding that they are physically attracted to what you consider to be the beauty, the physical beauty of another person, it represents in many ways an attraction towards the idea of energetic balance within themselves. Because what you consider to be symmetrical contains the idea of balanced geometric proportions. And that basic geometric structure that translates as the symmetry also has energetic representations of itself that underlie the physical symmetry. So when individuals find themselves very attracted to someone who's very symmetrical, very physically beautiful, they are oftentimes also experiencing an attraction towards that underlying geometric energy. And that attraction is designed to get the observer to create that same type of symmetry within their own energy field. And we understand many of you feel that you're either born looking very beautiful or not. However, understand as you embody the qualities of energetic symmetry, your physicality begins to shift, your physicality begins to change. And you can actually shift your appearance through maintaining that energetic symmetry within yourself.
So is the attraction to external beauty signifying imbalance within sometimes?
It can be a little bit of both. It can be the idea of noticing the balance and going into a state of appreciation of that balance and a desire to create more of that in the physical reality. However,
but if it's from a state of lack and craving,
that can also happen. Yes, an individual may feel very imbalanced within themselves, and then they see someone whom is demonstrating physical beauty, and that attraction can, for that individual, be a prompting to create that balance within themselves. So it can go both ways. Both of those motivations can lead an individual into the experience of attraction towards physical beauty.
Okay, wonderful. And how does the idea of so there's a big misconception, and I have a theory about it, that oftentimes you'll see people say, oh, this is the ideal, this is the most beautiful person in the world, and even scientists will say weird things like this. But I think biological leanings must factor into statements like that, to where it does seem largely agreed upon, but still a fallacy in the sense that just because a lot of people agree on it doesn't mean it's true. I mean, doesn't mean it's everybody's experience, I guess. Can you talk about the fallacy when we talk about conceptualization of objective beauty? How diverse is people's individual preferences?
Well, the idea is many of your researchers are, again, really only looking at the geometric proportions and how they translate in a physical way. For you're well aware of individuals that may appear to look physically beautiful, but when they live their lives and make choices, they end up making choices that are more negative. And that translates, again, as this sensation of what you call ugly. Because the energy, the negative energy behind those choices actually translates in a way that is not symmetrical. And the proportions are not balanced. There is disharmony within that underlying energetic reflective level of the physical symmetry. Does that make sense so far?
That makes perfect sense. Yeah.
So many individuals will look at just that physical, superficial symmetry, and they will then, in a sense, from a place of unawareness, see that person as holistically beautiful. However, many of you whom are a little bit more sensitive can look at some of these individuals, and you might say, yes, they look good, but there's something still about them that doesn't really resonate. It doesn't really click. I don't really feel that holistic attraction. And that has to do with the idea of sensing some of these underlying, let's just say, imbalances. Also, in addition to this, what can also be the case is you might notice that an individual demonstrates the idea of a physical level of beauty, a quality of symmetry, physically speaking, but you might also notice that their underlying energies, while they may not be negative, while they may not be out of balance, are organized in a way that are slightly incompatible in terms of a romantic connection between the person you're observing and yourself. And this has to do with the idea of what you consider to be some of the different elemental proportions that exist within your consciousness, and how these proportions relate to the idea of different themes you have all chosen to explore. So that can be another reason why some individuals can look at someone who's physically beautiful but still not feel that holistic attraction and connection. So when your researchers look at this, they oftentimes only look at that physical level, and that's why it doesn't seem to be as comprehensive as they claim.
That makes sense. And so, depending on what the person's exploring, their preference is like a needle point to where they should. It's excitement, of course, like anything is. But yeah, that makes sense. I guess. Yeah.
All right.
How does elementals factor into the physical appearance? That's, I guess, is that an aspect of the collective consciousness that then gets physicalized sometimes in like bits and pieces?
You're asking about the idea of how elements express in physical beauty?
The thing that you were mentioning, not
Yes.
something new. I don't know if that's what you were meaning.
Yes. So individuals, again, contain the idea of a different balance of elemental energies. And this represents...
What do you mean?
Elemental energies relate to the idea of what you consider to be the basic building blocks that consciousness utilizes to create the energetic level of the incarnation and the reality. For understand, what you consider to be the 5 major elements are the energetic building blocks that your own sense of consciousness is organized by. And it also represents the idea of the basic building blocks of what your physical reality is organized by. So these 5 major elements give rise to not only your sense of self, but also the idea of the quality of the physical reality experience. So different belief systems that you use, positive or negative, also have their own relationship to these elements, because the belief system is nothing more than a linguistic translation of an energy pattern, and the building blocks of that pattern are rooted in elements, these 5 major elements. There's different understandings of these 5 based on the understandings of different traditions in your physical reality experience. However, understand that these 5 basic elements can also, in a sense, give rise to how individuals physically appear. We'll give you an example of this. Individuals that are more connected to the fire element tend towards the idea of having curly hair. They tend towards the idea of being more slender in nature. They tend towards the idea of being somewhat shorter in stature. That's one example.
Can you give an example for the other elements also?
Yes. The idea of the water element oftentimes would relate to the idea of an individual whom, let's just say in terms of their skin quality, is a little bit more soft. They might be, let's just say, a little bit more doughy. Some of their features, such as dimples, might be a little bit more exaggerated. They may have larger eyes. That's an example of some of the qualities that may be present in an individual whom is more connected to the water element. An individual whom is more connected to the earth element may be either a bit more muscular. They may also tend towards the idea of a little bit of what you consider to be excess mass if they are not nurturing their form. These are individuals that appear to be very solid individuals. They have a sense of density towards them. So that represents in many ways what you consider to be more of an earth elemental person. These 3 elements are the foundation elements. Now, depending on the system you look at, there are different ways of understanding or interpreting the other 2. In Western systems, there is the idea of individuals that are connected to more of what you call the spirit element, the akashic element. And there are other individuals that are more connected to the idea of the air element, which is different, which is unique in comparison to the akasha. They're similar, but they are different energies. In your more Eastern traditions, in addition to fire, water, and earth, there is also what you consider to be wood as an elemental type, as well as the idea of metal as an elemental type. However, those two other elements, the wood, the metal, the air, the Akash, are in many ways what you would consider to be more secondary elements. The three we have mentioned are the primary ones. In the Western understanding, the Akash is more of the backdrop that includes the idea of fire, water, and earth. It is from the Akash, from the spirit, those other levels are formed. Some individuals can demonstrate more of the Akash than others, more of the spirit element than others. The air element is seen as a byproduct of the fire and water interacting. And the earth element is what holds the container for the fire and water to explore. So, primarily speaking, the air type in this Western understanding is an individual that tends to be a little bit slender. They may tend towards what you consider to be skin dryness if they are not well hydrated. They tend to have long flowing hair. So these are some, generally speaking, qualities of these elemental types.
Thank you so much. That's really interesting. Never thought that was gonna.
Yes, you're very welcome.
So there seems to be a. I'm not sure if it's a pre-assumption, but we assume that it's based on fertility, people's attraction to like larger breasts or even certain heights in men, things like that. Is that related to fertility exclusively, or I've also heard an alternative?
No, not always. There's, let's just say, strong connections to that, but those are not the only reasons. There are many different reasons.
It can represent a big heart if a woman has a big chest or something like that. Is that even true?
Please repeat the question.
I heard from somebody randomly that a woman with a big chest can represent to the man a big heart, and that's what they're attracted to symbolically.
Yes, that's exactly one reason why that can occur. It can also represent the idea of a connection to what you would consider to be the mother archetype. And that's not just the idea of a personal mother. That also relates to the idea what you consider to be the great mother, which expresses itself as your planet, as well as many other higher levels of that archetype. So that's another reason individuals can be attracted to this. Other individuals can be attracted to this for reasons that, let's just say, are what you might consider to be more superficial. It represents what you consider to be a status type of thing, to be in a relationship with a partner who has that type of body. So there are many different reasons.
They look relative to having that thing, so it's ego.
It can be. It's not always, but it can be.
All right. There's supposedly, I heard stories that there's aliens who, when they gaze at you, you fall in love with them. I think there is a gray of some kind that I heard a story about. Is this representative of a being who's just in tune with their own self-love and they just see their own beauty inherently, where people just empathetically respond to that? Or is that something else?
That's one reason. There's other reasons. The hybridization program has been known to utilize that type of effect to excite some of the volunteers to participate in the program. So there's different reasons for this. For some beings, that's just the way their energy translates into your physical reality. And for others, it has to do with the idea of what you consider to be an energy state that is intentionally chosen to appear to be more desirable, to appear to be more attractive. So there can be a few different reasons for this.
So for, let's say, the more I guess, okay, let me word the question a different way.
All right.
What are some declarations, or declarations, affirmations that people can use to get in tune with that kind of energy, the self-love aspect of that energy? I mean, getting in touch with their own, seeing their own beauty, because sometimes I think that people have a preference for a certain element, and it's like the guiding needle to where they are supposed to go, but it doesn't necessarily, they don't feel that same excitement towards their own physicality, so they're not seeing through the eyes of source, they're more so seeing through their preference, their personal, like,
Different affirmations will work for different people, but in general, affirmations that have to do with the appreciation of the natural beauty that's a part of all of you, because your signature frequencies translate as beauty, and that's that fundamental unchanging level of you that translates as beauty, which is why all of you are capable of demonstrating beauty in your realities, regardless of how your species looks at physical appearance. You can all create more beauty. You can all tune into beauty, and it's because it's a fundamental part of all of you. So any type of affirmation that is designed to assist one in tuning into that fundamental level, that source level, will serve here. Any affirmation that enables one to tune into what you would consider to be the beauty level will also be of service here. And in addition to this, the color frequency of pink, will assist here, because pink translates as a few different things in the physical reality. It has connections to romantic love, but it also has connections to unconditional love, universal love. Pink also translates energetically as what you consider to be physical attractiveness, physical beauty. And it softens the resistances to that reality because of its color. It's a very tender, warming, loving color. So resistances to that beauty, resistances to the self-love, resistances to the foundational level can be dissolved through that color frequency when one really plays with it, when one really explores it. So those are some tools that you can use. And remember, from the eyes of Source, all things, even that which is considered to be disgusting, are beautiful things. Because Source is able to perceive these things from a level that is human, but also non-human. So as we have said, disgust oftentimes relates to an extreme response to which you don't prefer. And that might be seeing an extreme example of what you don't prefer. So disgust might be a sensation. It also relates to the idea of detecting something that, let's just say, may represent an imbalance that could give rise to a physical disease, illness, death. That's when disgust naturally occurs for many of you. But those are responses that really exist only on a human level. So Source is able to see those things in a way that is non-human and is able to see the bigger picture of those things, why those things are unfolding, which all has to do with the growth and development and education of all beings involved. So Source is able to see that as beauty because it understands the context as to why that is occurring and the function and purpose that it serves.
So we can really just get in tune with that by, I guess, defocusing from our own personal. I think I can feel it. Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome.
My last big breakthrough in understanding this was energy. So, like I read in Conversations with God that there's the collective consciousness is a pattern of energy, and that attraction and repulsion, it has to do with energy. It's an interacting. It happens with everything. Everything is connected in terms like that. But you can interface directly with it. So I was practicing doing it that way, where instead of having the physical act of sex, I could do it energetically. So I would see the person as a spark of all that is, and then I would interface with that, seeing their beauty. But then there's not really much of a polarity or like vibrational difference with that because it's hyper sameness on that level. So then I would bring awareness to their energy bodies and then blend in that way also. And I noticed that if the person was attuned enough, they could feel it like at a distance. And I would, I'll put some more stuff down so I don't forget. I would use like vocalizations a little bit during it, and eye gazing if the person was in proximity, and an affirmation too that the whole universe is orgasming at the same time, because that's really the self. I heard Bashar briefly talk about that too, that at very high states that can be true, that the whole universe is feeling it if they're at a match to the vibration of it.
Yes, because you're tuning into that universal creational orgasm that's occurring billions upon billions of times per second. Every time you shift, that's occurring. That represents, let's just say, the heartbeat of creation itself, because the orgasm translates as the pulse of life itself.
Wow.
Life expresses not just physically. Life is technically the, let's just say, expression of all that is.
Okay, thank you. Uh, Briefly, how could I adjust this practice to increase the probability of seeing the blue flame? This is something that was talked about in conversations, and it's something in Eastern traditions. I had a synchronistic meeting with somebody because there's not really any information on it, but I had a synchronistic meeting with somebody from India, and he told me that it's a very, I guess you get in contact with either the soul level or something higher. I don't know, but it changes your aura. I don't know what it is, and I don't want to find out, so don't spoil it for me. But would this permission slip that I mentioned prior be helpful in facilitating that?
It may assist. We can share with you some pointers if you wish without really telling you what this is to increase your probability of seeing it.
Okay, thank you.
It may not occur while your eyes are open.
Okay.
So pay attention to the darkness when you close your eyes. Remember these states of being that you're practicing getting into. And when you stay in that state of being while in darkness, as dark as you can get it, that might mean doing something outdoors at night. That might mean blacking out the windows in your room. Whatever it is, when you allow for yourself to really sit in darkness with your eyes closed, that experience becomes more proximal. It becomes more available. The state of being you're getting into is a prerequisite for that experience of what you call the blue light or what you call the blue flame.
Yeah, I noticed that. I was spontaneously doing it, and then I looked more into it, and I found there's only like one or two books on it, but they were doing very similar meditations to those. I didn't mention everything that I was doing, but I would do very kinesthetic meditations, and then find out that this is something that yogis have been doing way before this body was ever born. So I thought that was interesting, and it was for that tradition.
Yes. This has shown up in many traditions, and it's because it represents what you consider to be a universal energy. It's one of those archetypal energies that many cultures tune into, but will use different words to describe.
I also thank you, by the way.
Yes, you're very welcome.
I've also been exploring incorporating the information you gave a prior time where, so like, I don't interpret libido as exclusively sexual. So sometimes I will go in nature and I'll feel like energy exchange. What exactly is libido communicating? So my understanding of it is it's saying, here's energy, express it physically. Is that what it's saying exactly?
That is one of its most basic translations. Now, understand that libido does represent an indicator of health if, of course, the libido is coming from a place of balance. A side effect of being in a very powerful state of health is having what you consider to be a healthy libido, and that's something that may be pronounced. Now, understand that this is the body's expression of the desire to create. So that does not have to be an act that is specifically sexual, although it can be. That libido energy, just as you have said, can be a motivational prompt to act and create within your physical reality.
And I was thinking about it in terms of vibrational difference and amplification. So I guess it's not technically sexual, but it does feel almost sexual when you're moving energy. And so I was doing it with the earth, and I felt like there is an amplification of sorts. Can you briefly elaborate on what exactly is vibrational difference and amplification in terms of ecstatic energy?
Well, things that can amplify what you consider to be ecstatic energies that translate as orgasmic, arousal based energies have to do with the idea of the unification of opposites. So your body, in many ways, represents more of the masculine polarity. The earth represents more of the feminine polarity. So when you begin to interact with the earth, that polarity gives rise to an energetic amplification of the ecstasy that you described. It's a side effect of the opposites merging.
And what would be the male? So the Earth is representative of female energy, but let's say I was in a female body.
It contains both, but is primarily feminine. Yes.
Would the sun be more masculine primarily then?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. And the moon is more feminine. Yes.
Absolutely. Pay attention to some of the qualities. Now, sometimes this translates into gender, but not always.
Yeah.
Masculine energy has to do with the idea of giving. Oftentimes it expresses as warmth. It expresses as extroversion. Oftentimes it expresses as non-physical experiences of energy. So your sun is an example of this. Feminine energy in general represents a more cooling, more nurturing energy. It is more receptive in nature and is more introverted. Now remember, all things are a blend of those two energies. However, there are going to be different proportions that exist in all things, which creates what you consider to be a net expression of either more masculine, more feminine. However, as you know, some beings really balance that polarity. So they express that polarity very equally.
And that's, yes. Yeah, that leads into my next question. When somebody has no, so in terms of what we would call asexuality, oftentimes they have no, I guess, physicalized thing that triggers, I guess you could say, arousal. What is happening mechanically there? What is that just indicative of a life theme? It just isn't compatible with their life theme, I assume. And then what is the physical, or I guess, I don't know. You tell me.
Well, it's different. It's different for different people. There's not a one-size-fits-all answer with this. For some individuals, it can come from the idea of a place of imbalance physically. Oftentimes, this relates to the hormonal system. That's a reason that can occur, but it's not the only reason. For some individuals, they have chosen that particular theme because there are other things for them to create in their physical reality. And let's just say if they did not have that type of effect taking place, it might, let's just say, distract them from accomplishing some of those things. So that's another reason that can occur. For other individuals, the sexual energy is still very much a part of who they are, but it has become so internalized that they don't really need to express it towards a particular gender or body type or being. They are using it to explore themselves, and they are using it to create their experience of physical reality. And because it's so internalized, it's not necessarily seeking balance externally. It is instead being used in a balanced way internally. So there's many different reasons why that phenomenon can occur. It's very different for different people.
Thank you so much. That was really helpful.
Yes, you're very welcome.
There's a notable Zen master. This is one of my more outlandish questions, so bear with me. But Ikkyu Sojin, and he was controversial Zen master. He not promoted, but he indulged in masturbation. He wrote poems about how much he loved his penis and how much. And this was like blasphemy at the time in terms of Zen Buddhism. But I definitely think that he brought some awareness to the fact that some of the rules don't necessarily make sense, and they sometimes conflict with the purpose of Zen. But so I got to thinking, if he existed today, would he watch porn? And if he did, what place would it be from? Because there are so many negative things that manifest from porn when it's done from a negative place. So, like, I guess sometimes it can be for a lack of human connection, and then people become socially inept and then they become addicted to porn. But how would a master approach something like that, if even at all? So how?
It's likely they wouldn't need to, and if they were doing it, it would be from a place of experimentation and curiosity, and wouldn't likely be something they pursue outside of that major theme of curiosity.
Okay,
Because
how come?
to a master, they recognize that all things, even things that are negative or unpreferred things, are all expressions of the divine. So they may explore with the particular flavor to get to know that flavor. Of course, because their, you could say, goal is to exist in a state that is able to reflect the source perspective, some of those things, because of different effects they can have with your bodies, may not be compatible with that point of view. So because of that, it's not likely they would stay there for very long periods of time. There's always going to be exceptions. There's always going to be people who explore things for different reasons. But in general, that's how we perceive a master likely to interact with something like this.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Um, Briefly, so we know about orgasmic birth, but I never really hear or read anything about orgasmic menstrual cycles where the woman is having a period. Oftentimes it's very uncomfortable. Can you talk about the negative beliefs that cause it to be expressed that way? And how can it feel what does it even feel like when it's natural?
When it is natural, it can feel relaxing. It can feel like the idea of a deep pool into the core of one's being, and in particular into a psychic portal within consciousness that links the feminine body with the earth and with the planet. So when it is explored from a place of what you consider to be physical balance, those are some of the things that can occur. It represents deep introspection and an ability to receive a great deal of different information. So there are aspects of that that can feel orgasmic. There are aspects of that that can feel very, you could say, emotional in nature as more information is received from the consciousness. And this has to do with the idea of energies getting stuck when the menses are experienced in a way that is painful. It represents the idea of blood and energy flowing towards the uterus, but because of different blocks that exist, and because of the amount of blood and energy that is flowing, the energy and blood gets stagnant. It's not able to flow, and that stagnation creates the idea of pain and, for some people, fatigue. But when the energy is flowing appropriately, when the energy is redirected, because it can be redirected so it doesn't all flow down to the idea of the uterus, then other aspects of the body can take advantage of that cycle in a way that allows for them to receive nourishment. So the upper centers, the organs, can more powerfully vibrate, thus allowing for that introspective informational receptivity to become more available to those in feminine bodies during menstruation.
And then can they just do that by just focusing and moving energy within their energy body so that there's no blockages? Or would there
Yes,
be like a more... Okay.
there are basic techniques for this. Different cultures have different ways of doing this. Yes, there's many different ways, but that's the idea. Moving what you consider to be the reproductive sexual energies regularly. So that energy is moving through the system. And then when it comes time for menstruation, the energy will be so freely moving that there's not really anywhere for it to get stuck.
And does that blockage relate to orgasmic birth as well? It's kind of the same thing, because oftentimes what they notice is when the person is giving birth in a place they're not comfortable or they feel tense, it's painful because of that resistance there. But when
Yes,
they do it at home, it's more likely to occur.
exactly.
Same
Yes.
thing.
Yes.
Okay. Um, what exactly? So a lot of people experience this disorder where I forget what it's called exactly. Actually, I think it's arousal dysfunction disorder or something like that. But it happens where they are constantly in a state of arousal, but it feels like like congestion in the lower areas. So I
Exactly.
guess it would be like the area.
It's another version of what we have just mentioned. It has to do with the idea of the sexual energy not flowing. There being some
Okay.
kind of constriction there. Different types of belief systems can create this. Many of these belief systems are formed early on. However, if the energy there is moved, it then makes it easier for the belief systems and those energies to become conscious. So that type of pattern then is no longer what someone experiences as what appears to be their default way of being.
What are those beliefs?
Oftentimes, it has to do with the idea of individuals feeling as if they're not able to express themselves. We know that might sound general, but when you think about it, when sex in your physical reality is, as you say, really good, it's when individuals are expressing who they are with zero inhibition.
Yeah.
So in life, if individuals are not fully expressing who they are, that can sometimes reflect in the sexual energy.
Thank you so much.
Yes, you're very welcome.
What is so? A lot of people I notice for tickling, I tickle myself. I can't tickle myself actually, but somebody else can tickle me. But if I identify them as myself, I don't get ticklish.
Yes.
What's up with that?
Well, it has to do with the idea of what you consider to be vulnerability in the presence of others. Because tickling, in many ways, and being ticklish represents the idea of someone else doing something to you. And oftentimes, in the areas where you are tickled, the ribs, the armpits, the neck, these represent areas that your consciousness is very connected to. When you are being tickled in the neck, the carotid arteries are here. Your higher self, your consciousness, in many ways grounds into your body through blood. The same can be said for the armpits. You have major arteries here. The organs also in many ways are major anchor points for the higher self, for the soul, for different archetypal levels. So when individuals are tickling you, more often than not, what's occurring is the idea of another person getting very close to you, getting very intimate with you. So it can relate to the idea of intimacy, you could say, themes that are being explored by the person. In other situations, it represents the idea of the other individual actually moving blockages. For as you know, there are some blockages because they are made of your own energy that can be challenging to move on your own or even perceive on your own. So when another energy comes, because it's so energetically different than your energy, that block then shifts, that block then moves, and that again can translate as the idea of a sensitivity.
Thank you. That's really
Yes.
interesting.
Yes, you're very welcome.
What is mechanically happening with borderline personality disorder, and how that relates to compulsions that it triggers sometimes?
For many individuals who are experiencing that condition, it comes from the idea of a place of emptiness, while also attempting to demonstrate to others that one is not empty, attempting to compensate for that. So individuals may oscillate between different types of personalities that recognize there is a sense of void and are in denial that there is a sense of void. And that can create different types of schisms and back and forth dynamics within the person's overall consciousness as they move between these different types of personalities. And the sense of compulsion that oftentimes is associated with this has to do with the individual attempting to fill that void. That might be a compulsion towards a substance. That might be a compulsion towards a behavior designed to get attention. So the key here for an individual experiencing this is to recognize that they are complete and to recognize their power their unconditional power, which is the same as unconditional love. So as they begin to love themselves unconditionally, their sense of power then becomes reaffirmed and the void then dissolves.
And that would probably be the same for, sorry, I had it just for a second, but psychopathic tendencies, because there's an emptiness, and it must be like such an emptiness.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
You're very welcome. Many of the mental health issues that your planet has to do with that basic imbalance. There can be other things associated with it, different types of nutritional imbalances, so on and so forth. However, from our point of view, that idea of returning to the center, exploring the unconditional love that's within you, and demonstrating it in your life, in your relationships with others and yourself, the sense of void cannot really exist. So many imbalances begin to shift as a result of that reunion.
That makes sense. Thank you so much. This is wonderful.
Yes.
So it was a more lighthearted question. Bashar has mentioned using Fibonacci sequences and things like that for music. So I was wondering, what do you perceive as the most optimal and most harmonious fundamental frequency to build a scale on, like a musical scale?
One moment. We're observing what we can bring through from the channel.
Okay.
This is not something his lexicon is familiarized with, so it may be a little challenging for him to translate the information. In terms of what you consider to be G and G major here can really dial into what you would consider to be frequencies that demonstrate the energy of collective consciousness, the type of collective consciousness that the physical reality is built upon and other levels of reality. So pay attention to G.
So what about so what if we divided the scale in a different way? What if is equal temperament a good way to divide a scale, do you think?
It can. It depends on the purpose. It depends on the purpose because, as you know, some forms of music are specifically engineered for healing purposes, and others may not have that specific intention in mind. So the way the tempo is done may vary depending on the goal an individual has or the intention.
Well, what if the goal is to is healing, but also multi-purpose? I'm thinking in terms of musical compositions. I would like to make things that work on multiple levels, if you understand. So, or maybe on one level, in an unconscious way, is helping people, but on another way, it's entertaining, and it entertains the ego mind as well as heals something a little bit beyond that. So I was wondering if maybe even using the Schumann resonance might be a good tone to build a scale around, and then maybe even using Fibonacci ratios for building the scale, possibly.
Yes, this can be a very powerful effect. The idea is to make sure that different frequencies are all in resonance with one another and simply build and play from there. But you can absolutely use the Schumann resonance. There are many different types of baseline frequencies you can use that really set the stage for your creative musical expression. The Schumann resonance is one. There are other, what you consider to be frequencies, such as the solfeggio frequencies, that can also be useful here. There are many different types of frequencies you can choose from. So just make sure that what you stack on top of it is resonant and compatible with the baseline frequencies, and you can generate very positive and entertaining effects.
And does it always change the resonance of the earth, the Schumann resonance?
There is shifts and fluctuations in that frequency on a daily basis. However, it ranges generally between 7 and 8 hertz. So there are some specific averages you can find here. Different scientists will have different ones, but that's the general range between 7 and 8.
And that's sufficient, and it doesn't have to be perfect.
It doesn't have to be perfect. As long as it's in between those ranges, it can be very beneficial. You could say your best to be as precise in a way that to you is exciting and you believe is supportive, and you will get results that are a match for the energy of your intention.
Are there any like sub-frequencies that would be very useful somewhere in between, I guess, 50 hertz and 200 hertz? Is there any particular frequency that would really give harmonious effects?
There are. It's challenging for us at this time to specifically translate them through the channel. However, simply look at the solfeggio frequencies, and there will be some that are within that range.
Thank you so much. That's really cool.
You're very welcome.
And what is your for all that is, the all that doesn't know itself is all that is that isn't said to be conscious, to my understanding, because consciousness needs a reflective aspect to be aware of itself. It needs
Correct.
To be, okay.
All that is what you consider to be source is the conscious aspect of that unconscious level.
Okay, that makes sense. And then, so is that unconscious level, is that just the all that doesn't know itself is the all? Is that just pure awareness? What is your definition of awareness?
It's not. Pure awareness in that sense would represent the idea of the all that is source level. Because that level of all that is that does not recognize itself has no awareness at all.
Okay.
There's nothing to be aware of.
But it still exists, so how do you define that?
It doesn't exist, and that's the paradox.
Oh.
Because it itself is non-existence. Existence is a paradox. Yeah.
Okay. Don't spoil any more for me. That's really cool. During dreamless sleep, when people focus and they're able to retain consciousness during dreamless sleep, or awareness during dreamless sleep, is that more awareness than consciousness? I just noticed because there is no reflective quality in dreamless sleep. You're just aware, yeah?
Well, the idea is that it can be a little bit different, because when individuals have a memory of having no experience, that implies there was an awareness present. And in order for awareness to be present, there must be a consciousness present. So it is the consciousness that becomes aware of something. So if someone is aware of something, it means an aspect of their consciousness was still present in the experience. The closest you can get to that idea of no awareness, that idea of non-existence, that idea of the one, is when you experience what you consider to be time slipping away. It vanishes. When you're in meditation or you're doing something you love for what feels like 5 minutes, but it's really been 20, that's the closest you can get, because in that time there was literally no awareness of the time passing in that way. That's the closest you can really get to that level in the physical reality. And that at best is just a translation.
So what is the difference when somebody must be focusing on some kind of reflection when they're conscious during dreamless sleep, but what are they focusing on when they lose awareness in the sense of time? What is the difference?
The idea is that there is certain aspects of the consciousness that are still present, and that might represent the idea of the individual using a certain meditation technique. Their consciousness is focusing on the technique. It might represent the idea of some type of externalized action the individual is focusing on that assists them in demonstrating the flow state. And those types of tools open up what you would consider to be a gateway within consciousness that allows for an individual to tune into that source level, that all that is level. And when you are tuned to that level of pure existence, you then begin to, let's just say, resonate with the idea of the reality or lack of reality that is non-existence, non-awareness. In other words, when you become completely aware in that sense, when you completely align with that source level within yourself, it's almost as if you begin to understand what non-existence is. Of course, the paradox being there's nothing to understand. Really, it's more of an experience that not much can be said about, which is why many individuals equivocate it to nothingness, but even nothingness can't really comprehend what it is, or more accurately, what it is not.
So
Does
what are
that make
the...
sense?
Yeah, well, no, it doesn't make sense, but I'm okay with that. I feel happy with the mystery of that.
We'll describe it like this. All that is existence, all that is not non-existence are in a sense two sides of the same coin. So when you become aware of that all that is level, that existence level, you become aware of the implied polar opposite, the implied polarity. And that's what you translate as the losing of time, of there not being a you who was having that experience of time. There's no memory of it. There's no record of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make a lot more sense. That's really cool.
Yes, yes. We are at the time mark for this particular conversation, and we thank you for all of your very exciting and curious questions this day.
Thank you.
And thank you. Our species, unconditional love and gratitude to you always. All right. How was that, Rem?
It was great. I got to get all the questions that I was wanting. No time over, but I really appreciate your service, by the way.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'm glad you liked that. That was a lot of fun for me too. I really enjoyed him talking about all the stuff he did. And as the channel, I was like, okay, I know like what I have to brush up on now, because there were totally some things you asked about where I was like, I just don't have the words. I don't know how to talk about it. But even where there was that lack of my understanding, he was able to still give you stuff, which I really appreciated.
Yeah, it was really cool. And then the non-existence thing, it was weird. Like, it was synchronistic. So I know there's like a little bit of psychic activity happening, but that was a question that I was going to ask. Like later, a lot of the time it would be like questions I was going to ask get answered from the question I was asking. It's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That was interesting. The non-existence thing.
That one's the biggest. That one's the biggest. I mean, pardon my language. That's the biggest mindfuck of a thing. And I literally think philosophers are like still like even in their coffins laying there like pondering this.
Like I never would have guessed. Like they're in tune with all the knowingness, and they're like, "Oh, so that's how." I never would have guessed.
Yeah. Oh, man. Oh God. It's so interesting. It's so it's the there's honestly I think he will probably at a certain point do a talk on non-existence, because there's so much there that even though it seems like this ridiculous unfathomable concept, there's so much there that like is implied in terms of what's practical. And a big part of non-existence in many ways to me represent, I don't want to go on too much about this, but it represents the unknown in a certain way, because there's that theory in quantum physics that something truly doesn't exist for us until we perceive it. Then it's like in our existence. And there's this big idea of non-existence actually sort of being this like paradoxical level where existence comes from, where novelty comes from. But that's not really it. It's sort of like a translation, I think, of that level. Because we can only experience the effects of that level, not the level itself, because the level itself is absent of everything. And it's because of that that everything comes into existence linearly or non-linearly. So a lot of juicy stuff there. And
Yeah.
yeah, that's right. When I talk about that, that's when I feel like I'm like literally in uncharted territory. I'm like, I don't know why I'm saying this, but this is just like what's coming out about this stuff, you know?
That's what's so exciting about it. I don't want to spoil it before it's ready. Like, oh my god, like there's so many questions. Like I heard this Bashar thing the other day where he was saying how the observer and the observer, it's the polarity of consciousness exists as a oneness. That's the true self. That's who everybody is. They're their own universe onto themselves. But then it splits off in a polarity, and we experience it as the observed and the observer. And I was like, oh my god, that solves this paradox. Scientists are like, you know, right now they're scratching their heads, and they're just like, but it just solves it in like one easy like. And then I heard about quantum decoherence and quantum coherence. That blew my mind too. How like everything is quantum when the particles are coherent, but because all the Newtonian laws exist only because of decoherence. They're matching up against each other in a really dissonant way, and that's why they act like physical particles when they're not. So like anything can be coherent. Like if it's implied if it's empathized with a frequency that makes it coherent, and I imagine the heart does that. So that's how manifestation happens. It makes things quantum. So I don't know. That blew my fucking mind. I was like, I was walking out of my yard and I was just thinking about this. Wow, I made that decoherent. It was just teleport right now. Or if I made that coherent, it was teleport right. Or it would be no, it wouldn't even teleport. It would be non. You know, it'd be way potentiated. So, yeah.
Wow, man. I have to look into that more, man. That sounds super juicy. I appreciate you sharing that with me.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I don't want to keep you. I don't know if you have a session. I can ramble.
Yeah, Rem, this was a lot of fun, man. It's always good catching up with you, dude. These sessions are a blast. I hope you have a great day, and the session, of course, is yours. So have fun with it, and
definitely share it out. I can't keep things for myself.
Oh, cool. Yeah, please use it however you wish. Love and appreciation for you always, brother, and we will talk soon.
Okay, blessings.
Peace.